The data pad was still warm. That was the first thing fleet analyst Verith noticed. Not the 3-kilometer field of wreckage surrounding the shattered Dominion-class survey vessel. Not the 47 missing Conclave crew members. Not even the fact that every ship sensor insisted the vessel had been destroyed without detecting an incoming weapon. The data pad was warm. It had been recording until 11 seconds before impact. Verith turned it over in her manipulator limbs and activated the damaged screen. The final image appeared. She froze. A human was standing in open space. No ship.
No visible propulsión. No protective vessel.
Just a human body suspended between the stars. And the human was looking directly at the Dominion vessel. As if she had been waiting for it. Verith closed the recording. Opened it again. The human was still there. She had spent 31 years studying spacefaring civilizations. She had analyzed their weapons, their migration patterns, their political structures, their psychological weaknesses. The Conclave considered her the galaxy's leading expert on predicting emerging species. Yet she had absolutely no explanation for what she was seeing. So she did what analysts do when reality refuses to fit the model. She classified it as equipment malfunction. She would regret that decision for the rest of her life. Because 6 months earlier, the Conclave had made what would eventually become known as the Sol System mistake. At the time, they didn't call it a mistake. They called it a routine territorial intervention. Earth was located beside 3 valuable resource corridors. The humans were technologically primitive by Conclave standards. They had interstellar communication, limited orbital capability, no recognized deep space fleet, no history of large-scale interstellar warfare. The Conclave had dealt with civilizations like this before. Send a fleet. Demonstrate overwhelming force. Destroy enough military infrastructure to establish dominance. Then offer negotiations. Simple. Predictable. Effective. The Conclave strike force entered the Sol System on a Thursday. 9 capital ships. 42 support vessels. By Friday morning, 14 ships were gone. Not disabled. Not captured. Gone.
No debris. No escape paths. No distress signals.
Just 14 empty positions where Conclave ships had existed hours earlier. Fleet Commander Asek stared at the tactical display for nearly an hour. How? Nobody answered. The humans hadn't even launched a conventional counterattack. Then the remaining Conclave fleet detected movement. The second wave was already coming. And this time, the Conclave knew it was dealing with something different. 8 weeks later, Verith was reassigned to Asek's command vessel. Her first briefing lasted 4 hours. She listened silently as Tactical Officer Dirk reconstructed the opening engagement. The initial strike was textbook, he said. 3 human military installations were destroyed. Collateral damage was minimal. We deliberately avoided civilian infrastructure. Verith studied the display. And the humans? Nothing. Nothing. For 6 hours. Dirk enlarged the timeline. We interpreted the silence as surrender processing. Verith tilted her head. And then? Dirk's chromatophores faded. Then every remaining human orbital defense platform activated. All of them. At exactly the same time. Verith stared at the display. The platforms had previously appeared inactive. Their energy signatures had been negligible. Their weapon systems had been classified as obsolete. Yet 6 hours after the Conclave attack, they came alive simultaneously. They destroyed 9 support vessels, damaged 2 capital ships, then vanished. Verith replayed the engagement. Again. And again. Finally, she asked the question nobody wanted to answer. They knew we were coming. Dirk said nothing. Verith zoomed in on the timeline. They shut down their defenses before we arrived. Yes. They wanted us to believe they were helpless. That appears to be the case. Why? No one answered. That question became the first of 3 mysteries Verith would spend the next 7 months trying to solve. The second was even worse. Why hadn't the humans used their best weapons? 14 Conclave ships had disappeared during the opening engagement. The energy signatures suggested a weapon system far beyond anything a civilization at Earth's technological level should possess. Yet the humans had allowed their weaker orbital platforms to fight first. Why? Why reveal inferior weapons when superior ones already existed? Verith finally said it aloud. They weren't defending themselves. The room went silent. They were measuring us. She pointed toward the tactical display. They wanted to know how we respond to conventional attacks. A voice came from the doorway. For what? Commander Asek had entered without anyone noticing. Verith looked at him. To prepare for whatever comes next. 3 days later, the Conclave received a message. Not through diplomatic channels. Not through established first contact protocols. The humans had somehow accessed Asek's private command frequency. The transmission contained only a human woman's voice. Calm. Precise. Almost polite. Fleet Commander Asek. We reviewed the terms you transmitted following the initial engagement. We find them unacceptable. We are prepared to offer counterterms. You have 48 standard hours to respond. We understand you will use this time to prepare a larger offensive. A pause. Then the sentence that changed everything. We encourage this. The transmission ended. Nobody spoke. Dirk finally broke the silence. She wants us to attack again. Verith stared at the dead communication channel.
No.
Dirk looked at her. She expects us to. Veritha's expression hardened. There's a difference. That night, she reviewed the human historical archives. And for the first time, she noticed what every previous Conclave analyst had missed. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting itself. Not minor conflicts. Not ritualized territorial disputes. Industrial wars. Global wars. Civilization-scale wars. Humans had developed weapons capable of destroying their own world. Then they had built more. They had created entire doctrines around fighting opponents with greater resources, greater numbers, better technology. And somehow, despite all of it, they were still here. The Conclave had classified this history as a weakness. Internal division. High aggression. Political instability. Then deleted it. She replaced it with a single sentence. Humanity's history of war is not evidence of weakness. It is a training record. 6 weeks later, the second Conclave fleet arrived. 41 capital ships. 109 support vessels. 3 times the original force. Verith watched the fleet approach Earth. Something felt wrong. Not strategically. Something deeper. The humans had asked them to come. The Conclave had come. That wasn't a military decision anymore. It was walking into someone else's plan. Then the fleet reached engagement range. Nothing happened. No defense platforms. No human ships. No weapons. Earth simply sat beneath them. Blue. Quiet. Alive. For 6 hours, nothing moved. Then the human transmission returned. This time, there was video. A young human woman sat at a table. Dark hair. Simple clothing. Completely calm. On the table was something Verith recognized immediately. A Conclave communication relay. The human smiled. We found this 14 months ago in the asteroid field near your approach corridor. Verith stopped breathing. The human continued. You deployed it approximately 6 standard cycles ago. She glanced down. That means you've been listening to our communications for 6 years. Then she looked directly into the camera. We've been listening to yours for 4. The transmission ended. The command center exploded into activity. Officers shouted. Analysts demanded new security protocols. Communications teams scrambled. Verith did none of it. She opened 4 years of intercepted human communications. Then she realized the truth. The humans had known they were being watched. Every military transmission. Every tactical discussion. Every movement the Conclave had intercepted. The humans had allowed them to hear it. The Conclave hadn't been spying on humanity. Humanity had been feeding the Conclave information. 4 years of carefully constructed lies. Verith searched the tactical archives. The fleet's current positioning had been based on those transmissions. The approach vectors. the expected defenses, the estimated weapons capability. All of it. Manufactured. She found ASEC. Commander. He looked at her. How compromised are we? Verith answered quietly. All of it. ASEC's expression changed. What? Our tactical intelligence. She placed the display in front of him. They've known we were listening for years. Silence. And they used that knowledge to build our entire strategic picture. ASEC looked toward Earth. Then back at Verith. How long? 4 years. Nobody spoke. Then another file appeared. It was a personnel record. Conclave format. Verith opened it. Her own name appeared. Her rank. Her research. Her published studies. Her theories about emerging species. 17 years of professional work. Everything. At the bottom was a handwritten message. 4 words. We read your work. Verith stared at it. For the first time in her career, she felt something close to fear. Because this wasn't random deception. The humans had studied the people studying them. And they had built their strategy around the analysts themselves. Verith returned to the original image. The humans standing in open vacuum. She pulled up the timestamp. Then the approach vector of the Dominion vessel. She calculated the trajectory. Her system took 4 minutes. The result changed everything. The human had not been traveling toward the ship. She had been traveling away from Earth. For 11 days. Through open space.
No visible vessel. No detectable propulsión.
And somehow, she had been exactly where the conclave ship needed to look. 11 seconds before impact. Verith stared at the image. The human wasn't attacking. She wasn't threatening them. She was simply making sure they saw her. Why? Because humans understood something the conclave didn't. Sometimes confusion was more valuable than firepower. Sometimes the best weapon wasn't destruction. It was making the enemy waste time asking the wrong question. Verith returned to the human historical archives. She found another concept. A phrase repeated across thousands of years of human military history. No plan survives contact with the enemy. At first, she interpreted it as pessimism. Then she read the surrounding doctrine. She understood. It wasn't pessimism. It was preparation. Humans didn't build strategies assuming everything would go according to plan. They built systems designed to keep functioning after the plan failed. Other civilizations planned to win. Humans planned to continue. That distinction terrified her. Because if a civilization plans to win, it eventually reaches a point where the cost becomes unacceptable. It stops. But if a civilization plans to continue, there may be no obvious stopping point. Verith looked at the Third Fleet deployment schedule. 67 capital ships. Enough firepower to destroy Earth's major infrastructure from outside conventional human weapons range. She stared at the number. Then whispered, "We are making a mistake." Nobody listened. The Third Fleet entered the Sol system 6 weeks later. 67 capital ships. Hundreds of support vessels. The largest military force the Conclave had ever assembled against a single emerging civilization. For 22 minutes, everything was normal. Then the flagship disappeared.
No explosión.
No warning. No weapons signature. One moment, the eternal conclave existed. The next, nothing. 11 seconds later, the human transmission returned. Same voice. Same calm tone. Fleet Commander ASEC. We have been patient. We have given you 4 opportunities to reconsider. We have shown you enough to understand what continuing this engagement means. A pause. We understand that political pressure may make withdrawal difficult. Then the human's voice became colder. We are not your political problem. We are your military reality. The channel closed. Dirk stared at ASEC. She counted them. ASEC looked at him. The opportunities. Dirk nodded. The first transmission was one. The second was another. She knew how many times would come. Verith closed her eyes. She had understood the pattern. Too late. The humans weren't trying to destroy the Conclave fleet. That would create anger. That would create martyrs. That would justify another war. Instead, they were doing something much more dangerous. They were making the Conclave leadership prove to its own governments that the war was unwinnable. Every additional fleet made the political cost of continuing higher. Every failed attack weakened the Conclave. Every human response made Earth's position stronger. And then Verith discovered the final piece. The weapon that had erased the Conclave ships wasn't a conventional weapon. It was infrastructure, distributed across the Sol system, hidden inside asteroid fields, planetary networks, possibly even the star itself. The defense system wasn't protecting Earth's territory. It was inseparable from it. To destroy the weapon, the Conclave would have to destroy the very system it had come to exploit. ASEC stared at the tactical display. So we can't remove their defenses without destroying what we came here to take. Yes. And they knew that. Yes. How? Verith looked toward Earth. Because they understood our objective before we understood theirs. The room became silent. The Conclave had entered Sol expecting to negotiate from a position of overwhelming strength. Instead, humanity had turned the entire system into a strategic trap. Not a trap made of mines. Not fleets. Not missiles. A trap made of information. The Conclave's own assumptions had become the walls. 6 months after the first attack, the withdrawal began. There was no surrender ceremony. No human victory broadcast.
No celebration.
Earth sent no final message. It simply watched the Conclave fleet leave. Verith submitted her final report. 412 pages. Her conclusion was simple. The Sol engagement should be classified as a strategic defeat. The resource corridor should be considered permanently lost. And humanity should no longer be classified as a developing civilization. The Conclave rejected the report. Officially. Then quietly implemented nearly every recommendation. The Sol system disappeared from future resource plans. The Conclave withdrew. Publicly, they called it a geological reassessment. Privately, everyone knew the truth. They had attacked humanity 3 times. And every time, humanity had learned more about them than they had learned about humanity. Verith kept the image. The human in open vacuum. Standing between the stars. Alive when she should have been dead. She never discovered exactly how the human had survived. She eventually realized that wasn't the important question. The important question was why the human had been there at all. The answer was painfully simple. The human didn't need to stop the fleet. She only needed the fleet to look at her. Because once the Conclave started asking questions, humanity had already gained something more valuable than a destroyed ship. Time. Information. Fear. And control of the narrative. Years later, Verith would write one final line in the private version of her report. The Conclave had spent centuries categorizing civilizations. Strong. Weak. Advanced. Primitive. Aggressive. Manageable. They had never created a category for humanity. Because humanity didn't fit the old definitions. Humanity didn't need to be the strongest species. It didn't need the largest fleet. It didn't need the most advanced weapons. It only needed one thing. The ability to keep going when everyone else expected it to stop. The galaxy had mistaken humanity's history of conflict for weakness. It had mistaken survival for luck. It had mistaken restraint for technological limitation. And worst of all, it had mistaken human silence for surrender. Verith closed the image one final time. Outside her viewport, Earth disappeared into the distance. She watched the blue planet until it became nothing more than a point of light. Then she finally understood what the Conclave had actually encountered. Not a primitive civilization. Not an emerging threat. Not a species trying to survive. They had encountered a civilization that had spent 10,000 years learning exactly what happens when someone stronger decides you should surrender. And humanity had made a decision long before the Conclave ever arrived. They would not win every fight. They would not control every battlefield. They would not always have the better weapon. But they would continue. And sometimes, continuing was enough to make the stronger enemy lose.